This episode was made possible by my generous supporters on Patreon. Welcome to my new patron this week, Dr. Hovin, who gets a brand new World Trigger Avi and a series recommendation for the Manga Mosaic podcast. And he's my most frequent co-host, so he didn't really have to do that. Like he is in this episode. This is a bit awkward. I guess he just wants that Samurai 8 episodes. Psst. Anyway. So look, I'm Polish. It's in my nature to complain and whine. There's a reason why my favourite line from One Piece is Usopp's "I'm already negative." But I begrudgingly have to admit, 2020 hasn't been completely shite for me. Sure, my mental health took a deep dive a bunch of times, but that's been normal since before the social isolation. On the other hand, I started the World Trigger podcast, and that keeps being fun and satisfying for me to do even after 10 episodes. I've satisfied both my completionism about new series in these top 9 lists and covered long-running series endings on Manga Mosaic, which has been more satisfying for me to do rather than covering them individually. I had some great guests on. Also, I keep forgetting to mention I've had the honour of joining the socially distant World Elsewhere theatre company, spun off from the Browse Held High channel, which I've admired a lot. I've had some lovely people support my work on patreon.com/Wensleydale Cheddar and get me very close to that video essay goal. So, last year has been a mixed bag for me personally and, well, not professionally, this is a hobby. And so was last year's round of Jumpstarts, really. Well, they weren't a hobby, they were a mixed bag. A lot of them are pretty decent reads, but they all come with their own sets of problems. And it's not like I can't wait to read any of them each week. Bucker. Just like my little victories this year, they weren't enough to lift my spirits entirely, but they did provide me with some momentary solace in this hellscape. So with that lukewarm introduction out of the way, this is my arbitrary ranking based on how much I enjoyed them. These are the top 9 new Shonen Jump manga of 2020. Number 9?
Me and Roboco.
I'm usually more partial to gag manga than my mutuals, so I really expected to like this one more, but my preconceptions once again betrayed me. From the mind that gave us the Promised Neverland parody manga, Me and Roboco is the story of a young boy from a working-class family who wants his parents to order a cute robot maid, because he's jealous of his classmates having a cute maid these days. But it turns out that they buy the cheapest maid around, who's bulky and has knobber knees and can't do any housework. Yeah, a lot of the humour from this manga is related to the fact that Roboco isn't traditionally feminine, which is not great.
3-Chapter Club is a lot funnier when highlighting the mystery of what horrific invention Roboco even is than when it's trying to play off an ostensibly ugly character trying to be cutesy as a laugh.
Some of the jokes do it for me, but I've noticed they're barely Roboco related. I like the running gag of the mom pointing her knife at everyone and being surprisingly knowledgeable about Jump, although I have mixed feelings about her expecting her 10-year-old son to do dirty stuff to Roboco or Madoka. What do you mean primary school students shouldn't go further than Ayakashi Triangle? Primary school students shouldn't be reading in the first place. What does this mean, Miyazaki? You're making me think Shueisha was a mistake. Another running gag from the sidecast I really like is that the Gorilla Boy, he's kind of bullying Bondo, but it always turns out that he's extremely nice and supportive in the end, and also he turns out to be a doting big brother. But then there's the time that Roboco accidentally rescues a mountain climber when she's delivering a pizza, but also she thinks he's a Karen who's concerned. That's nicely translated there. Then it also turns out there's more to the rich boy than he lets on, and that Mako is jealous of Roboco's sturdy knees. I feel like there's a lot to enjoy there, even though the central premise is kind of iffy and some of the jokes fall flat.
Very hit and miss. Might not pick it back up since pure gang manga aren't really my speed anyway.
Number 8.
Time Paradox Ghostwriter. I think I fall on the more charitable side with this series, where I chalk its overall half-baked nature to Shueisha basically being strong-armed into ending it due to the intense backlash in Japan. Honestly, I don't think this backlash was fully deserved. I never read this series as trying to justify plagiarism, and I wish it had been given another volume or two to explore its actual ultimate subject matter of creator burnout and overwork, a very real and pressing subject for Shonen Jump on the whole. The protagonist sadly ends up being rather one-note, and the manga rushes like hell to the finish line. At the very least, the art throughout is lovely. It was nice to see the cross-cat mangaka's talents without their awful fanficky writing.
Controversy aside, I was already apprehensive of this series since it was in the hands of Tsunehiro Date, author of Cross Account. Granted, he was only in charge of the art, but I was still afraid some of his incel writing tendencies would influence the story somehow. What I got instead from the first few chapters was a surprisingly touching tale that was quite relatable for me as, well, let's admit it, a failed content creator. Jumping into the creative world with determination, consistency, talent, all of the above is never quite enough to make it without luck, and when you're met with contradictory feedback, the fickle needs of the market, and external pressure tied to family, work, studies, it's no wonder you can lose all your motivation even without pre-existing crippling depression and anxiety. Yep, I'm talking about Teppei here, and absolutely no one else. It's honestly no wonder that while chasing his dream, Teppei would resort to desperate measures, that is, copying this story from future issues of Shonen Jump, that his microwave is sending him weekly to keep it alive, no matter what the in-universe ethics here may be. It's a very interesting portrayal of this kind of desperation that made for very strong characterization in the first few chapters. After reading those, I thought to myself, this is the beginning of a unique, complex story that has a bright future ahead of it. It's a pity that it then goes off the fucking rails! My god, Teppei's extreme fucking mental gymnastics that he has to make so as not to show Aino, the girl whose manga he rips off, the microwave, or the future Shonen Jump issues that it sends. His fucking pretentious self-flagellation and martyr complex as he decides that, oh no, I'm the only one who can bring Aino's story to perfection, rips all of his pages to shreds and draws like 17 different drafts of the same chapter. The absolute goal of a plot twist of, by the way, spoilers ahead, skip to the next one if it matters to you, a time code in the description, the manga going all, oh no, Teppei's mission was actually noble all along, he's drawing the manga to save Aino from certain death. Look, he's biting his finger so hard so that there's blood on his storyboard, oh no! I could almost feel the pain if I wasn't dying from laughter right now. Reading through all that, I'm not completely opposed to the direction the story took, and it should be said that the ending is very sweet despite the clunky lead-up to it. It's the reason it's still on this list, but while it traces some interesting ideas, ultimately it's a Shonen Jump manga that can't honestly criticize the insane Shonen Jump work ethic, and the plan to prevent a death from overwork with even more overwork is not very revolutionary in that regard. I don't have a tagline to end this. The future rules? Number 7.
Guardian of the Witch.
Guardian of the Witch was one of those series that showed a lot of promise early on, and then I was really surprised that it ended as early as it did. It established a cool, high-stakes premise that was simple to understand in an intriguing setting that was at the same time not too lore-dumpy. The characters were well-rounded and had interesting motivations, the goals were established quite efficiently. It did everything a new series would want to do, and while its art wasn't technically perfect or stylistically revolutionary, it had a lot of personality, and the facial expressions always felt very human despite the simplicity, which is always a selling point for me. The character dynamic between Marnifer and Fafnir, the witch tasked with protecting a city-state against monsters with her self-destructive magic, and the knight tasked with protecting Marnifer, then with killing her and then deciding on protecting her again, was very vibrant, felt alive, and in general this manga had a big debut series energy, in the best way possible too, filling me with hopeful nostalgia as I read the first half of it. The only part of the premise I was iffy on was the central concept behind the witches and how it served the part of the Shonen Jump formula I don't necessarily care for. So yeah, we're doing the rigmarole of setting up the main female character becoming a normal girl as the main girl, which involves getting rid of her cool powers, because otherwise they'll conveniently destroy her. I don't know, guys. You do it once, it makes for an interesting conflict, but if Yui Kamiyo Bone Collection and arguably Undead Unlock doing it as well, it's almost like you don't want your female character getting into fights. Oh, but you don't get it. She's actually really powerful. All wishes are. Only, no, without her tower, Marnitha can't properly control her magic. Pretty cool limitation, though. And in general, witches really serve support roles for the Guardians, so... I don't know. It feels like you can't really have that excuse.
I feel like I'm in the minority that kind of dug what I read of this, but honestly it's hard to justify why. The art, premise, and characters aren't particularly unique or original, yet the manga was a thoroughly comfy, competent read. I'd have quite happily kept up with more of it had it taken off. That said, I'm sure its inability to stand out played into its ultimate lack of traction, and despite my measured praise, this title too is a member of the 3-chapter club. Nice would be the optimal word.
The accelerated ending brought forth by an early cancellation bumps Guardian of the Witch down to pretty low on this list, but I really think it had the potential to be something great, with all its problems. I hope Sakano gets another series soon, and if they do, I'll be prepared to guard it with my life. Number 6.
Ayakashi Triangle.
We all knew this was going to happen once a new series was announced by Kentaro Yabaki, author of To Love Ro. We all knew it was going to be softcore porn in a magazine that kids read, something that, happens for some reason. We know how things go, we all talked about it, and we're all tired of the discourse. Here is the video where I talked about Yuna. We follow Matsuri, an exorcist ninja who tries to protect his childhood friend Suzu from creatures born from human emotions known as Ayakashi. He and Suzu are the only ones who can see them, but Matsuri becomes increasingly hostile towards them as he decides to take over his granddad's ninja business. Suzu, an Ayakashi medium, attracts the king of Ayakashi, Shirogane, disguised here of course as Garfield. Shirogane wants to devour her for her vitality. Matsuri easily defeats him, but Shirogane doesn't really want them to get comfy and romantic, so what does he do to spoil the mood? He gives Matsuri a girl's body. Oh no, the horror! Because bi people don't exist, apparently. Even though Suzu is definitely, absolutely into Matsuri no matter what he looks like, and Matsuri is definitely, absolutely into her no matter which body he's in. But, you know, no matter the attraction, there has to be something missing, because it's not a boy and a girl. So as long as Matsuri is stuck being a girl, even though he's kind of a trans man now, magically created, but still, he can never ever be more than Suzu's friend. He might just have to abandon being a man, because that's what queer people are to you, right, Mr. Jump? You can think they're a joke, you can fetishize them all you want, but you can never ever admit they're real. No, I never expected Kentaro Yabaki of all people to write a good trans story with amazing character depth, but, you know, you could still write the same kind of horny story with some understanding of how gender and sexuality work, like, it's possible. Look up the webcomic Alguna Shiva if you want an example. And it's a pity, too. I like all the characters, Yabaki's art style is much more to my liking now, and I feel decently invested in his storytelling, despite the manga's premise being based on ignorance. So yeah, I'm gonna keep reading it.
Weirdly decent? Look, the debate on whether a manga this shamelessly raunchy belongs in a magazine that can be accessed by young kids is its own kettle of fish. But taken on its own terms, the emotional beats land pretty well, the action is very creative at times, and a lot of the cast are likeable. I particularly like the balance it hits with Suzu, where she's allowed to quite openly fawn over Matsuri in ways that aren't demurely romantic, without it being played as an over-the-top pervert joke. It's surprisingly refreshing.
Number 5.
Undead Unluck, also 3-chapter club. Though reading through the rest is still on the docket. The central premise of combining Andy's zombie body with Fuko's unlucky power feels like the making of some really clever action beats. The non-con, gropey humour to achieve this, I am less keen on. I've heard this series gets much better and I am interested to give it another look though.
I remember my first reaction to this series being pretty similar. The premise of the series was one of the most original I've seen in Jump for a long time. Following this immortal sexagenarian in his journey to die in the most brutal way since he keeps regenerating. You lied to me, destroy all humankind? And having this girl cursed with unluck help him on that quest. I'm not usually one to shy away from a raunchy comedy, but again, the age difference, the way how Fuko is clearly not comfortable with Andy molesting her, the rapey stuff, the fact that this is all in a magazine available to children, again, that's, how'd you say it?
That's no good.
Thank you, Sonic. Yeah, not a fan of that bit. The rapey jokes are downplayed later on, but the dynamic stays like that for a bit, as they try to join the union of other negators to survive. And then the one time she wants to initiate something, he's like, listen, I ain't rotten enough to bang a chick just because she's desperate. Fuck off. So it's not hot if it's consensual. Great message to put out there in your magazine with, 3 sex offenders in it. Undead Unluck has some problems beyond that. The pacing is inviting as it's action-heavy, but quite exhausting as it never has the time to stop and explain more of its world. I'm still not sure what Uma are. I think they're horses? They're not horses? Are they horses? What have they got to do with horses? I don't know. However, the larger premise of the series is quite inventive. The Union is an organization of negators like undead and unlocks, set on killing the god, imposing certain rules on Earth like language, race, or death, and imposes more penalties on it if the negators don't accomplish impossible tasks he gives them through the Book of Revelations. Coupled with a charismatic cast with expressive faces, well, except for Andy, he has the same scowl for the majority of the series, and dynamic action, Undead Unluck still makes for quite a fun read. Even more so, given the fact that, as far as my anime list tells me, this is Tozuka's first serialization. I'm looking forward to seeing more from him in the future, except, with less rapey shit. Number 4.
Mashal, Magic and Muscles.
Who would have thought? Who would have expected this silly little Harry Potter parody to be the new hit jump manga of 2020? An amenable boy is hidden away by his wizard-adopted father for harboring a terrible secret. He's one of a few non-magical humans in a world full of mages. His dad encouraged him to train for self-defense, and he's become pretty swell, and he enrolls in a school of witchcraft and wizardry to change the world for the better for muggles like him. But to do that, he has to pretend to be able to use magic. Also, he has to pretend to have a magic scar so he fits in with everyone. You get it, whatever distinctive feature Potter has, he is the opposite of that.
This manga slaps. For the first few chapters, I was genuinely not sure how a manga that wore its one inspiration so heavily on its sleeve couldn't feel overly derivative, or outstay its welcome. But 1 year in, this manga has not failed to be one of the most delightful action comedies in the magazine to read week on week. The titular protag strikes a wonderful balance of being down to earth and above the snobbish, status-obsessed, hierarchical world around him, without coming off overly snarky or aloof. Despite his stoic, resting expression, Mashal is fully capable of showing anxiety, childlike joy, and just general awkwardness. The humour very much finds its own groove from the aforementioned influences, despite the similar, plain-faced overdog posing as an underdog narrative to One Punch Man. Rest assured, you will get a fundamentally different experience from this manga than you do that series. Pair this with some of the most dynamic, well-staged fight scenes in the magazine right now, and it's no surprise to me that this series has taken off so much. This mangaka can draw a punch landing with the level of catharsis of peak-era One Piece, and I'm not sure I can find much higher praise for this type of battle manga than that.
So, Hajime Komoto has yet to be a transphobe-like rolling, but, to be honest, yet is the keyword here. It's quite ironic, like, when Joanne unmasked herself with her malevolent manifesto, manga Twitter was all like, who needs Harry Potter when this series does the exact same thing and it's not written by a transphobic wanker? Like, yes, woke King Komoto with his 3 female characters, one of which is immediately infatuated with MASH, while the other 2 are antagonistic, manipulative seductresses with love-related magic. Oh, and McGonagall is also there, I guess. Although, I suppose unlike Harry Potter, which was written by a white liberal, Mashal has some clear class consciousness. Win some, lose some, I guess. But yeah, despite this sausage party of a cast, there is a lot to like here. The humour is very tied to the aesthetic of the series, limiting itself to a shoddy, minimalist, sketchy style the majority of the time, with equally shoddy anatomy, only showing off more dynamic line work and key action poses. It's part of the same Dadaist rejection of conventional beauty we can observe in Chainsaw Man, or hell, even Bone Collection, or Mitama Security, or the entire work of One. Right. It's hard to ignore how the emotionally stunted MASH resembles Mob, only without the psychological depth or the strong emotional beats to complement the comedy. It's equally difficult to avoid the comparison of how Mashal's premise is very much one storytelling fit into the Shonen Jump formula. And it's perhaps for this reason why I didn't enjoy it as much as most did. Given how everyone in my circles has been reacting to this series thus far, I was kind of expecting Mashal to reach the top of this list. Due to this disappointment, my review is starting to seem quite negative, but I genuinely enjoy Mashal when it leans into the goofy nonsense and doesn't pretend its drama means something. One of my favourite jokes in the entire series is when Mash slams a posh brick's face against the door when he threatens to have him expelled, and he says, "Expelled. Big deal." Actually, that would seriously be a big deal. And then the vice principal comes and Mash immediately buries him underground like a serial killer because he didn't seem that open to reason. What's one more body, really? Wait, vice principal? Oh, bloody hell, why is this Harry Potter parody full of Americanisms? And also, oh god, I didn't even talk about the insult character. What is up with this insult shit? No. Stopping this review before it gets any more negative for this spot on the list. Number 3. Magu-chan, God of Destruction. In the premise that we've seen a lot of times before, a higher being descends onto Earth to live a normal life with an average student, everything lies in the execution. And in that regard, Magu-chan, God of Destruction, very much succeeds.
My new favourite jump manga of the year along with Mashal. It's sort of like if the anime The Devil is a Part-Timer was less otaku-focused and more of a cutesy kids series. The way these civilization-threatening horrors, now reduced to cute, relatively harmless pet forms, adjust to casual modern life and interact is charming, funny, and at times touching. While I've not laughed out loud every week, it's consistently put a smile on my face. Glad it seems to be turning a corner popularity-wise. Let's hope the trend continues.
It couldn't have managed to survive without a good cast, and again, Kamiki delivered. All the gods are, of course, entertaining in their own right, the arrogantly cute Margot, the pathetically poor Nabucco, and Oneris the human Stan. The main human character, Ruru, is probably my favourite of the bunch. She strikes a good balance of playing the more serious spoil to Margot, but playing more to her goofy side whenever the other characters are involved. She generally seems to be written very organically, her unique collection of quirks making her seem more like a real person than any archetype I know, further adding to the charm of the series. She also becomes the heart of the series whenever we see her dealing with actually living alone and her mother working abroad. Although, arguably, it kind of takes away from the character depth when the mystery gets resolved and we actually meet her. If I had to grasp at straws and be a little negative, I'd say the supporting cast needs a little more going for them, as so far the interactions between Margot, Ruru, and Ren, Ruru's neighbour, are what I'm here for. I like most Nabucco chapters, but some of those that leaned into his torture porn I wasn't a fan of. But this is a small price to pay when, we got a slice of life series that doesn't have creepy fan service in a magazine that literal children can read. Oh my god, how long has it been? I can actually recommend it to my nieces and nephews. Yes, more of that please. Read Magu-chan. 2020 has given us a lot of comedies of varying degree of slice and of life, and appropriately so for this year. It's rarely laugh-out-loud funny, but the cozy nature of the series has managed to find itself a niche in Jump, so let's hope it's here to stay. Number 2.
Phantom Seer. 3-chapter club. Generic high school exorcist premise somewhat elevated by one of the most appealing new art styles of the most recent crop of Jump series. There's a distinct, eye-pleasing sleekness to everything, and the visuals really sell the horrific nature of the phantoms.
Compared to the other titles on this list, this one is more of a straightforward action shonen, but honestly, with all the slice-of-life gag manga we got, I can totally get behind more of a run-of-the-mill Exorcist story. I know it must sound ridiculous given all the Exorcist comics we got this and last year, but I can't shake the feeling there is something special about this one. Riku is a lass with a sixth sense that lets her predict danger. She likes to use it to help people, but one of these days she meets a demotivated, cowardly and selfish lad called Iori, who tells her that there is a phantom haunting her. Iori's sister, the most powerful exorcist we know, ropes him into helping Riku get rid of the phantom with his shamanic powers. So, first of all, it's quite funny that this series has become a successor to We Never Learn in my mind, somehow. The theme of Phantom Seer's first chapter is the same as that of that series. Your talents and your hopes may not necessarily align, but that doesn't mean you have to deny your own feelings. Riku finds out that her power is that of a beaconing hand. She attracts phantoms, bringing people closer to danger rather than helping them avoid it, as she hoped. Meanwhile, Iori's talent is to become a powerful shaman, even though he wants to become a normal boy, so he has to become powerful enough to do so his sister can't tell him what to do. Oh my god! Finally, it's the boy who wants to become normal. This is so refreshing! And after Bone Collection and Yui Cameo and Undead Unluck and Guardian of the Witch too! And yeah, while all the characters are interesting elements of the series in their own right, Iori is a unique protagonist to follow. I don't think I've seen such a varied array of traits that make up his cominess in a Jump protagonist recently. And I do enjoy that being a creepy pervert isn't part of it. But yeah, him being a spineless, lying piece of shit afraid of attachment to others is quite enjoyable. His backstory explaining his demotivation without giving too much away is that he lost someone in a similar position to Riku, and is quite typical, but it ties well into her motivation of wanting to be helpful and becoming a... Wait! The leading lady learns how to be a shaman so early on into the series, and she learns how to fight, and she actively participates in these fights as well. Oh my god! Can she do that? Is that even allowed? If I had to pick a series in 2020 which I feel the least negative about, it would probably be Phantom Seer. None of it blew me away so far, but it is written very competently. Some elements of the setting are very iconic art-wise, the perspective is quite interesting, and the imagery is delightful. The character arcs hook you in quite quickly, and you are left wanting to discover more about the world. But go ahead and see for yourself. Kill me. And the number one new Shonen Jump manga of 2020 is... A Gravity. I am so sorry. I know you all dislike this manga, and I am so sorry for putting it so high. I know I'm usually the first one to write a series off for even a smattering of transphobia, but... Maxie was right, I can't not like A Gravity Boys. 4 boys from the space program are the last people from Earth, and they miraculously manage to land on an inhabitable planet. They can't repopulate, so the history of humanity ends with them. However, they come into contact with a higher being that can grant the 4 humans' wishes, all for their own amusement. The first of those being a gender-bending artifact, over which they debate which of them should take a bait and become a girl. So Chris, a feminine-presenting boy, is pressured into using the artifact, basing on his personality, despite feeling like a boy and definitely being at odds with the idea and uncomfortable with the crew members treating him differently. He doesn't go through with it, but then the punchline of the first chapter's like, "Ho ho, he sure does behave like a girl, right?" It's not the best. Thankfully, the transition artifact disappears from the story for a few dozen chapters, until it's reintroduced in a rescue arc when the other 3 crewmates have to be temporarily transformed into girls. There, unlike a lot of its peers, A Gravity Boys does seem to have, at the very least, an understanding of gender existing, since the potion makes the identity change along with the body. Then again, the potion wildly changes the personalities to their opposites, such as the genius Gerald becoming dumber, and the pervert barber turning into a prude. Okay, I guess that's a regular fantasy side effect. Oh, and also the overly emotional about every little thing now. Oh, really? So you're telling me that these four were never overly emotional as boys? They were perfectly rational beings. Har. Women are so emotional, and how they behave is all genetically and not at all socially conditioned. Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah, Gravity Boys does recognize that gender identity isn't tied to one's body, but there is a suggestion that it is necessarily tied to one's personality traits and sexuality, which is a mixed bag. And it's not really obvious if it's just the way of thinking of these horny boys, if it's the author's framing, although considering Geralt is supposed to be a scientist, I don't know. So Chris continues to be treated in places as a kind of Schrodinger's girl, and the manga kinda makes a trap joke when Grislow Krakowski... Wait, Grislow Krakowski? Okay, I haven't had the chance to mention this, but the cast is very international, and apparently one of the lads is Polish and named after the city I live in, so, Anyway, so there's this scene when Krakowski thinks he's gonna take a bath with Chris, who he thinks is a girl, and he closes his eyes and all the boys are there. So, why in Usopp's name do I like this series? Why have I turned around so much on it? Why have I made this my number one? I think it's because, during a difficult time in an already depressive state, it hasn't failed to make me laugh. Despite all the lows, Gravity Boys is a manga in which a main character's life is in danger because he can't take a dump anywhere than his own private lavatory. Yes, I'm keeping that in. It's a manga where his friend's efforts to take him to the loo become a dramatic action scene, which is then spun into a flashback showing where the titular Gravity Boys first met. In chapter 27, another instance of food poisoning is spun into another flashback of the boys' days at the academy, where Chris, Saga and Barbara are roped into a battle between students from the campus, where a pact was made to replace regular violence with shoving broccoli up each other's backsides. In chapter 41, everyone reads out haiku from the poetry slips hanging down from the nipple pasties to impress a conglomerate representative. In chapter 47, Krakowski discovers Chris has a penis and has an identity crisis. He undergoes a spiritual journey by reaching deep inside his psyche and meeting the human manifestation of his own penis, lustro. Lustro means mirror in Polish, and he meets a mirror image of himself. And the chapter name is Mirror. That's clever. Do I just like it because it has Polish in it? I have the weirdest sense of patriotism since I despise almost everything about my country, but when I see it referenced in foreign media, my nationality suddenly becomes a huge part of my identity.
This is the mindscape brought into existence through your intense thoughts about penises, the penis world. And I am the human manifestation of your thoughts, Lustro. Do you feel that overflowing energy? This is how it feels to be truly connected with your penis. Listen closely, Grislow. First, penises have 8 attributes. The most important thing within this penis world is to know the attribute of your own penis. So your attribute is wind. That will be advantageous in a battle against an earth attribute penis.
And then he meets the spirit of the fire penis and learns that penises have 8 elemental attributes, including the holy penis and the evil penis. So Krakowski learns to use his wind penis and teaches it to the other boys, and together they use the penis power to defeat a space parasite with the penises. And yes, it's a gay panic metaphor, but he's Polish, so that checks out. Thinking about it, even if it's my top pick, I still couldn't honestly recommend this manga to anyone. It requires a lot of investment as a serialized gag manga, it has some writing problems, and when it comes to gender and sexuality is #problematic as fuck. But It's the kind of problematic I could analyse and process on my own terms, instead of having it thrust upon me as an online controversy. And it gave me some great laughs to boot. And at the end of 2020, I think that's exactly what I needed. And that's why A Gravity Boys is my very personal number one. So there, writing these two podcasts was intense, but I'm glad I managed to talk about all of these new manga. I'm not sure if I'm going to cover them all at the end of 2021, should I? Well, if you want me to, be sure to let me know in the comments, and maybe drop me a buck on patreon.com/Wensleydale Cheddar, since that's what pays the bills for me. Are we even going to be alive at this point? But apart from that, that is going to do it for the 2020 Jumpstarts episode of Manga Mosaic. You can listen to us on so many podcast hosting sites: Anchor, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Podbean, Breaker, Overcast, Radio Public, Pocket Cast, Podbay, Play FM, Listen Notes, Castro, Google Podcasts. Why am I singing this like the poker rap? Anchor.fm/Wensleydale Cheddar or YouTube.com/Wensleydale Cheddar is where all the links are. And remember that, much like Grislow's dick, the YouTube algorithm is a dark abyss of sorrows and woes from which channels like these never resurface. And what helps us navigate it is liking, subscribing, and sharing the podcast with a friend. On YouTube, you get access to not only Manga Mosaic, but also Duckface Diaries, a World Trigger podcast aiming to discuss the World Trigger manga volume by volume. We're just at the climax of the large-scale invasion arc, so it's the perfect time to join. Come listen and tell a friend. A huge thanks to my Worlds Elsewhere buddy, Mike Fatum, for providing the perfect voice to a human manifestation of a penis. If you're curious, you can also see our performances in Midsummer Night's Dream, directed by Kyle Calgren, where he instead plays the human manifestation of an ass. That is, he plays bottom of the mechanicals. Follow him on Twitter at VengeanceGod and listen to his pop culture podcast Ace of Geeks. A huge thanks to Hovin for lending me his thoughts on the Jumpstarts. You know where to find him. At Hovin with an H on Twitter, Hovin with an H on YouTube. He hosts our sister show HOVIN'S Hideaway, a podcast on miscellaneous topics but mostly manga. Check out his recent Hideaway Ramble, where he attempts to explain the entirety of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Also, he made a podcast on a hugely popular Jump Plus series that I haven't yet covered, Kaiju number 8. If you'd like to help me upload these on a regular basis, consider supporting me again on patreon.com/Wensleydale Cheddar. In return for your support, you get access to rewards such as a shout-out any name in the credits, requesting a short series to be covered on a Manga Mosaic podcast, a World Trigger Duckface avatar, access to behind-the-scenes files, show notes, and future video essay scripts, that's a new thing, and requesting a series to be covered on a long-form video essay. Higher-level contributors get access to manga threads for series from the Shonen Jump Vault I'm reading for the very first time, including my first impressions on the chapters and standout panels. Help me reach goals such as reviving World Trigger Abridged or more manga video essays. Now patrons can vote on the subject of the video essay every time we hit a milestone, and we're very close to hitting it. What are we, like $6 away? A sincere thank you to Milo Jack Stillitz, who composed our opening theme. You can find his work at soundcloud.com/MiloJackStillitz. So, what were your favourite new manga of 2020? And also, can you hear this excavator ploughing the snow outside my window? It's been doing that for like half the episode. Well, anyway, let me know in the comments and take care.